I'm grateful for the opportunity. I have benefited from RUSI events throughout the last several years, both as a commander at NATO's Allied Land Command and then at Commanding General U.S. Army Europe. And so I'm grateful. I know what y'all represent. So thanks for this chance. So I retired about 2.5 years ago, went to work immediately for SEPA, a DC-based think tank that focuses on NATO, transatlantic relationships, deterrence, and really NATO's eastern flank, Central and Eastern Europe. We did our first study about 1.5 years ago, focused on the Sawaki Corridor, this strip of important geography between Kaliningrad and Belarus that connects Poland and Lithuania. We first started calling it the Sawaki Gap because we thought, okay, there's a connection to Fulda Gap and it could sort of take on this iconic meaning. But then we realized it's a corridor, because a corridor is something you want to keep open versus a gap, which is something you want to close. And of course, NATO's efforts and the efforts of our Polish, Lithuanian, and German allies were all to keep open that corridor between Poland and the Baltic countries. So that study yielded some good results in terms of how do we strengthen relationship between Poland, Lithuania, Germany, and some specific things that needed to be done to strengthen the deterrent effect there. We then turned to the next study, which was built on top of the Sawaki Corridor report, and we entitled it One Flank, One Threat, One Presence, a Strategy for NATO's Eastern Flank, with NATO's Eastern Flank running, of course, from the Arctic all the way down to the tip of Turkey and the Black Sea region. And the idea was to address the security threats in this area that had been addressed by NATO in some part after the NATO summit at Warsaw, with the creation of enhanced forward presence and tiered forward presence. But what we believed is that the Black Sea region did not get the attention that it needed from the alliance. In fact, the Black Sea region is probably more strategically important to the Kremlin than is the Baltic region, because the Black Sea region is where the Kremlin, specifically from Crimea, is able to launch everything that they do into Syria, which has put millions of refugees not only into Turkey, but into Europe itself. And then, of course, what they're attempting to do in Libya, which has the potential to send another 1 million refugees into Europe. So we thought we needed to address this and to compete in the Black Sea region in security terms, but also in, of course, diplomatic terms, information terms, and economic terms. So that's where the idea of coherence along NATO's eastern flank came from. It actually was CDS, General Carter, who one time used the phrase, the need for coherence along the flank that got my attention. And so that's what we started looking for. Does NATO have coherence along its eastern flank? If it doesn't, then you end up with disjointed logistics, disjointed command and control, disjointed planning. In fact, there is no plan for the Black Sea region. We have a graduated defense plan for the Baltic region, but not one for the Black Sea region. Not for lack of trying, but for political reasons. Turkey has blocked formal approval of that. And so this lack of coherence along the eastern flank has affected so many aspects that are essential for deterrence. We have headquarters everywhere, but they're not exactly sure who they report to. Even the NATO force integration units are not exactly sure who they report to, who has what authorities. The new headquarters from the German headquarters there, called the Joint Sustainment Enabling Command, there's still uncertainty. And so that's why it was so obvious to us that we needed a plan or a report that would lay out specific recommendations for how to achieve coherence on NATO's eastern flank. And one of the specific recommendations that I'll get into in some detail here is enhancing and integrating air and missile defense for the theater, which means you need a coherent strategy for a coherent flank. So that's kind of the broader context. Our report, obviously, that's what we do at think tanks, is produce reports, and hopefully we give you recommendations that are substantial and achievable for NATO, for nations, for industry, and for others who are focused on these challenges. What I'd like to do is briefly go through wave tops, some of the other specific recommendations that we made to provide more context, and then get into some detail on the enhancing and integrating air and missile defense. And hope to be done at about the 20-minute mark, and then look forward to, so in about 12 more minutes, and then look forward to your questions. The very first thing, of course, build coherence along NATO's eastern flank, and inherent in that is raising the priority of the Black Sea region, to develop a strategy for the greater Black Sea region that puts the Black Sea in the middle of the geostrategic map. If you take your map and you move and you look at it, most NATO maps, the Black Sea is always in the bottom right-hand corner. Turkey is just in there, and that affects how we think about it. But if you slide the Black Sea up towards the middle of the map, all of a sudden you start thinking about Turkey and Georgia and Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova, and even the Balkans in a completely different way. And it opens your eyes, and we could be a lot smarter about how we work with our Turkish allies about developing policies for Ukraine, and how important Romania and the Black Sea are. The next sort of block of recommendations was entitled Enhance Deterrence and Defense. And this is where we talk about enabling SACEUR's area of responsibility. NATO in Brussels already has a good program there, but this gets into military mobility, crisis decision-making, but it also includes what we call developing a more sophisticated approach to burden sharing, to what 2% really means. I mean, all of you are watching right now this really unnecessary friction that's been created by possible announcement or decision from the White House to withdraw almost 1/3 of the American soldiers that are based in Germany, and somehow this was related to 2%. It reflects a serious misunderstanding of what 2% is all about. And if we want to get allies like Germany, the Netherlands, Norway to spend more, maybe what we need is a more sophisticated approach to what 2% means. What do we need them to do? What does the alliance need? And it might not be more tanks. It might be more trains. And we can talk about this as much as you would like. Next, we talked about gaining the initiative in the Baltic region. Frankly, I was always tired of responding to whatever the Russians were doing, the latest exercise, the latest buzz of a NATO ship by Russian aircraft. It seemed like we were always responding to them. And I think it's time to stop that. So how do we get the initiative? In the Baltic region, part of that comes from improving mission command there. The Germans have set up a Baltic Maritime Component Command in Rostock. Now we have a chance to really coordinate exercises in a much better way. Of course, Baltops happening just about completed this week, a very good exercise. We have the potential to achieve sea control in the Baltic Sea very quickly, I believe, if it was ever necessary, thanks in part to the geography, but also thanks in part to the two partners that are there, Sweden and Finland, and the routine exercising that we do. And the fact that Sweden put troops back on Gotland Island always impressed me, that Sweden recognized that this was important, that they had to remilitarize Gotland Island. Now we'll start getting into the Black Sea. How do we gain initiative in the Black Sea? We've talked about planning. Turkey should be the center of gravity here, but Turkey is so focused. Understandably, they're fighting 3 different terrorist organizations. They're basically surrounded by the Russians, and they are reluctant to see a significant increase in NATO capability in the region. So we recommend that Romania becomes the center of gravity for NATO's efforts there. And by that, I mean, not that Romania is more important than somebody else, but that this is the place where we base intelligence fusion, that we continue to increase the American footprint there at MK, which is the Romanian air base next to Constanta, the largest port on the Black Sea, and that we do things to enable intelligence sharing, help create an A2AD bubble for Romania to protect that port of Constanta and to protect its exclusive economic zone as well as its territorial waters, which Russia is threatening all the time. And of course, we talk about supporting NATO partners like Georgia and Ukraine. Georgia should be a member of NATO right now. It would be a game changer in the Black Sea region because Russia will not attack. If they see NATO is cohesive and that we're ready, I don't think Russia will attack a NATO country, to include Georgia. And if we show that we're not committed, though, if we lack the cohesion, if we lack coherence, and we're not at the level of readiness that we need to be, and if we can't move as faster than Russian Federation forces, then I do believe that the risk of a terrible miscalculation goes up. Let me cut now to our recommendation. I think we had about 22 recommendations overall within the context that I just described to you. But this one, enhance and integrate air and missile defense, we paid a particularly strong, lot of attention to. And it comes from a conversation I had about 4 years ago with a very senior intel expert that worked at Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, SHAPE in Mons. And we were talking about the possibility of an attack. I was commanding general U.S. Army Europe at the time. And he said, Ben, when the Russians attack, they are going to start with salvos of missiles and rockets. And I have to say, I'm embarrassed to say, I was shocked. I couldn't believe that a person like in his position, that's what he thought. I had always just kind of assumed, you hear so much about hybrid war, little green men. He says, no, if the Russians are going to roll the dice on an attack on, say, Lithuania or Poland or Romania or Estonia, then they understand that our whole strategy is based on rapid reinforcement, and they're going to have to destroy or disrupt airports and seaports and transportation infrastructure, at least within a certain area that would make it difficult for us to rapidly reinforce, to respond in any kind of meaningful way. And so we're talking about Polish seaports, Lithuanian, Latvian, Estonian seaports, Romanian seaports, airfields that would be used, pre-positioned equipment. These are the kind of things that I think will be at risk, and perhaps even Bremerhaven. So a combination of cyber strikes that could severely disrupt, but I expect to see salvos of missiles, cruise missiles, rockets, hypervelocity weapons, drones coming after all of our infrastructure. And of course, the U.S. Army has one Patriot battalion in Europe, one battalion, that's it. So we have some challenges. It was that comment, though, that really it woke me up and it realized that missile defense, and I'm an infantry officer, so this is not home cooking. Air defense cannot be an afterthought. It can't be, hey, we need to have some of that air defense stuff too. It's got to be integrated. It is an essential component of our deterrence. Former SACEUR General Phil Breedlove wrote, establishing integrated and robust air defense is the next logical step in protecting NATO's forward presence, pre-positioned equipment, and the ability of the United States and NATO to access and operate in the broader region during a potential crisis or conflict. So old SACEUR knew that without missile defense, you might not even be able to access, let alone operate during a crisis. Our recommendation includes several things. At the political level, the alliance must build consensus about the perceived threats of air and missile attack. It should decide in advance how it might respond to an air and missile attack, and then refine and rehearse its framework for political decision-making to respond quickly. So the Russians or the Kremlin or any adversary that might attack is not going to say, hey guys, go ahead and start your decision-making process. We'll give you a few days to figure it out, and then we'll start knocking out airports and seaports and all your sensors. This is going to happen under duress. And so the sooner that process starts, obviously, the better. So which is why at the political level, this needs to be sorted. At the military level, the alliance must improve and organize its various air and missile defense capabilities into an integrated air and missile defense system that effectively combines land, air, space, and maritime-based capabilities. And we have to figure out, how do we transition from peacetime to conflict? Now, some specific things that come under that broad recommendation. Number one, we need a permanent, fully integrated air and missile defense architecture led by NATO's Air Command, or ARCOM, which is at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, and U.S. European Command, led by U.S. Air Forces in Europe, also at Ramstein. They can perform early warning and command and control functions and defeat incoming air and missile threats during the transition from peacetime to conflict. So these headquarters have got to be able to do this, even though it's not Article 5 yet. Still, American and NATO mission command, sensors, shooters, all the deciders have already figured out how they're going to do this during this transition, not after 20, 30, 40 days of the North Atlantic Council deciding, is this an Article 5? What do we do about it? So pre-thinking this and having the structures in place clearly are essential. Number two, synchronize the several existing integrated air and missile defense exercises into a coherent exercise program that is designed to develop, implement, and validate the technical solutions and procedural controls needed to conduct combined and joint exercises across the entire European theater. This has not happened in the last 7 years. I know that because I was at Allied Land Command from 12 to 14. I was at U.S. Army Europe from 2014 to 2017, and I've been here in Frankfurt for the last 2.5 years. We've never had a theater-wide multinational joint air and missile defense exercise that tested everything. There have been lots of pieces, but we've never had one where sensors in one country, shooters in another country, or afloat, and mission command taking place across all the different nations and domains. I still remember my friend Ricky Ellison giving me a hard time. We were sitting at Crete for a Patriot live fire. I was so excited. And he watched it. He said, how come the Navy's not a part of this? How come we don't have other allies besides the Germans as part of this? And I started realizing, and that radar that sits on a mountaintop in Turkey, ships in the Mediterranean, we've got Patriots, our 1 battalion that will probably be protecting Ramstein. How do you stitch together German, Dutch, Spanish, Greek, Turkish, French air and missile defense systems, Norwegian? How are we protecting our allies in the Baltic countries? You can't do it unless you do an exercise and something that pulls it all together. And so our recommendation, of course, is that there is an exercise that happens, that culminates every year. 1 year it's LiveX, the next year it's a command post exercise, a simulation, but there's got to be something theater-wide every year. And of course, during the year, you're doing tabletop exercises. Just like in American football, you've got the linemen over here, the receivers over here, the running backs over here. Everybody's doing their parts, but it's got to be brought together before you ever play a live game each year. Other recommendations include, of course, investing in next generation fighter aircraft and a follow-on for NATO's airborne warning and control system, AWACS. These things are getting older and older. Adversaries are not sitting around. We're going to have to invest in that. And I'm not here to recommend a particular platform, but I do care a lot. I think interoperability is going to be key if we're going to be successful. I think some of our allies like the Netherlands, Spain, UK, Norway, Denmark, and Germany can do more in the maritime domain, whether it's sensors or shooters as part of enhancing air and missile defense. The capacity of air and missile defense. To be honest, I am very worried. We do not have enough interceptors and other preferred munitions to last what I anticipate may be several weeks. If the Russians are going to roll the dice, they're going to be at this for a while. And every exercise I've ever been in that looked at, included air and missile defense, we always ran out. And these are not things you can, fire up the factory, do another shift, and generate more Patriot interceptors, for example, in a short amount of time. And it's certainly not cheap. We need to take a cold, hard look at our capacity for each theater. Unlike in the CPX, where I could steal Patriot interceptors from my old roommate there in Korea and use them in Europe. In the real world, that's not going to work. We think that supporting the rapid fielding and training of Patriot systems in Sweden, Poland, and Romania is important. Sweden's already underway fielding Patriot. Poland and Romania are coming. The U.S. Army's 10th Army Air and Missile Defense Command there in Kaiserslautern, Germany, should be kind of the daddy for organizing this. And it's don't wait for the systems to show up, but doing everything we can so that when they do have the systems, crews, officers, sergeants are ready, and you've got this community for sharing information. My friend Frank Rose gave me some good advice about getting left of launch. What can we do to prevent an opponent's rockets and missiles from ever getting off the launching pad, whether it's disruption or somehow preempting that launch? I'm always in favor of shutting it down before they can ever launch. It's a little bit harder to hit it once it's in the air. Last couple of things I'd mention, and then Sid, I'll come right back to you. Convert air policing, NATO's air policing mission that is in the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea, convert those to air defense. I mean, we're talking about changing the mission, changing the mission profile, rules of engagement, but in my research tells me that we actually, in effect, are already doing that. We just haven't changed the name. And I think for deterrence purposes and making sure that the North Atlantic Council has put its shoulder to this, formally remissioning from air policing to air defense. The last thing I'll say, our allies have got to do more. I've said it 3 times already. We have 1 Patriot battalion in Europe, and most likely the priority for that Patriot battalion is going to be protecting Ramstein Air Base. And we can't just assume that everybody is going to buy Patriot. Poland is doing this, obviously. Romania is doing that. But who's protecting Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? They can do things to protect at a low level, protect against drones. But Germany and the Netherlands in particular have got to do more. Whatever system they use, they have got to do more. This is about protecting European citizens as well as infrastructure. And I don't think there's anything controversial about investing in air and missile defense. And then, of course, Germany, the Netherlands both have a key role in the exercises and mission command. The men and women in the Luftwaffe, they know how to do this. They're good. It's getting at the higher level and the political will to provide more leadership and to be willing to put pressure on U.S. European Command. Honestly, I don't know why there's reluctance at EUCOM to do this theater-wide joint multinational air and missile defense exercise that is full body workout. I was unsuccessful for the last several years pushing that, and I hope that we'll get there. Sid, thanks for the chance, and I'm heading back to you.